All right, it's 2 o'clock. Let's play ball, right?
Yep.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna call the regular meeting to order. And I'm gonna request Stephanie, Trustee O'Brien, would you please do the roll call?
I shall. Trustee Long,
Aye.
Trustee De Silva.
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Crow.
Here.
All right. Trustee Cranenberg.
Here.
Great, thank you. Trying to see who am I missing. Trustee O'Brien is present and Board Chair Trainer.
And present, but also our Juniper
Oh,
Yoshihara.
my apologies, Juniper. Don't see. Oh, there she is. I see. Okay, I don't see a camera, so perfect. Thank you. Juniper, you're present, right?
Present.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good, welcome. Okay, and then let's see, we're gonna adopt the regular and closed agenda. Is
So
our
moved.
motion
So moved.
second?
Se-
I would like to suggest a slight modification that we shift the presentations of the carbon fee legislation and the electric vehicle. Is there agreement for that?
Shift to what?
Yes. we
They
do.
replace the, switch,
Oh, flip them.
yeah, flip them.
Understood. All right.
As agreement as to that amendment?
Yes.
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 Okay, great. All right.
All right. Just for the record, we are being joined right now by Trustee Conti.
Oh, great. Welcome, Diana. And then that gives me an opportunity to say happy birthday to Diana. The awesome, I guess, September 11th date is one that we all remember, but it is also a special date for Diana. So happy birthday.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hope you had a
Thank
good
you.
celebration.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. And then we also know that Phil's getting a little older this month.
Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, thanks.
Must-
I'm
I
trying
didn't
to,
say you were
One
getting
day.
older, Diana. I said Phil was getting older.
I'm trying to stay young, guys.
Aren't we all?
Yeah,
And
our
calendar
dreams.
gets in the way.
Yeah.
yeah. Gravity too. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, happy birthday to all. And if we
Thank
were in
you.
person, we'd be having cupcakes or something, right? Okay. All right. So I need a motion to adopt the amended and then roll call. Please.
So moved.
Second.
And then
Second.
Diane, you want to do roll call? This is the
Yeah.
amended agenda.
Trustee Crow,
Aye.
trustee De Silva,
Aye.
trustee Cranenberg,
Aye.
trustee Long, trustee O'Brien,
Aye.
trustee Yoshihara, is she here?
Yes.
Here.
Trustee Conti, aye, trustee Trainer.
Thank you. And I'll share in a minute. Dr. Kuhn was helpful in giving us a timeline, so I'll give you that in a moment. But first, we have public comment. And I don't know if I see Professor Kuchera. Is he here? All right. Well, okay, he's not, but he submitted written information that I'm going to ask Mickey if you could just send out that to all trustees, because there's a link in it. And if many of you remember, the physics and astronomy department had the summer internship program with the Space Grant Consortium. And there's some, I only looked at a couple of them, but there's some really great student presentations that they did. And there's links in what Mickey will be sending out. So I think it would be great if we could all just take a few minutes and honor the students' work. And it's pretty cool. Okay, so Casey, you say you're muted, but you're making noise. Okay, so is there any other public comment? Seeing or hearing none. We're moving into the study session, and the first item will be the public hearing on the redistricting process, and we're allocating approximately 30 minutes for that. We will then have a carbon fee legislation presentation led by the Sustainability Committee, and we've allocated approximately 30 minutes for that. We may not need it, but I just wanted to say that we were thinking that might be helpful. There's 15 minutes for the EV charging station and then 30 minutes for Measure B. And we hope that will probably keep us on track. And then when we're done with that, I'm going to do a check-in to see if you want to break then or how we're feeling and what kind of break we might want, because that's kind of a deep dive into a few things. Both the electric vehicle charging and the carbon fee are items on the action portion of our agenda, which we will take at a later time. Okay, so with that, Dr. Kuhn?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you all. I would just like to immediately hand this off to General Counsel Mia Roberts-Shaw to provide our introductions and presentation and ultimately move into the hearing.
Wonderful, thank you. So we'll begin today with a presentation from our demographer, Justin Rich of Cooperative Strategies. And
Mia, can you hold?
Sure.
I'm not sure who Casey is, but Casey, we can hear your phone in the background. Thank you.
It is.
Mia, please proceed.
Sure. So we'll begin today with a presentation from demographer Justin Rich of Cooperative Strategies. Okay. And then after the presentation, I will recommend the board open the public hearing, take action to open the public hearing. So before I turn it over to Justin, just a reminder that the reason the district and the Board of Trustees selected Cooperative Strategies to serve as our demographer for this redistricting process is that the price for services was competitive. The organization was recommended by outside counsel who've assisted other districts with this process. And most critically, I think the organization has Marin County experience assisting Nevada Unified in particular recently, as well as experience working with other community college districts. So they have been very responsive and good to work with. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Justin for the presentation.
Mia, just one quick before we go to Justin. I just want to be clear that we're really just going through the process today. We're getting some public feedback in the hearing portion, but there will be no board responses to the public comments at this time. Is that correct?
That's correct. Justin will go over the process, but what today is to really hear from the community. First, share with the community the process we'll be going through, and also hear from the community thoughts on factors that should be considered when we reach the point of crafting draft maps, that we will then hear from the community on those draft maps as well. So Justin will also touch on that. And if anyone needs to leave during his presentation, I do want to flag that we have a second public hearing with the same presentation and a second opportunity to provide feedback at a special board meeting on September 28th. That's in 2 weeks from today. We also have a comprehensive website with a lot of this information where we will be posting recordings from today's presentation, provided we have no technical issues, as well as next week's.
Thank you.
With that, I'll turn it over to Justin. Thank you.
Thank you, Mia, and apologies for jumping the gun there. I would have started the presentation a little later. Thank you. It's nice to be with you all, and also nice to hear why we were selected. We appreciate that feedback, certainly. We've already talked a little bit about it, or Mia introduced it. There's really three things I think we want to cover today: the background for this process, a little bit about the timeline that feeds into that process, and just some of the considerations that we look at for drawing maps, and of course to get input and feedback. So without further ado, I'll get going on that. I think there we go. So just a quick background on the California Voting Rights Act, which took effect in 2003. Most notably for this process, it prohibits the use of at-large election systems when they impair the ability of a protected class. In this context, the protected classes are racial and language minority groups as defined by the Federal Voting Rights Act. And when they impair the ability of a protected class to elect the candidate of their choice or the ability to influence the outcome of an election. When we look at the election systems that are used by community college districts, they really fall into three categories. The first is at-large election systems, where everybody all voters within the district vote for all candidates for board. That's the most commonly
Take a
used.
quick nap.
The second group is from trustee area elections, and I would look at this as sort of a hybrid, where candidates are required to live in particular areas, but still all of the voters within the district are eligible to vote for those candidates. Finally, the by-trustee-area elections, it's important to note this is the that is most safe from being challenged under the California Voting Rights Act. Candidates must reside in specific areas, and then only those voters that live within those areas are eligible to vote for those candidates. We'll talk just quickly about the process. There's really two phases to this. There's 4 public hearings required in all. 2 that happen before maps are drawn, and this is intentional in order to make sure that we gather input and feedback that we then incorporate into our maps. The first of which is today, and then 2 weeks from now, we'll have our second public hearing. We will then begin to draw maps based on that feedback, based on certain other considerations that are in the law, and we'll share those with you and come back to you. Those dates haven't been determined yet, but what we would imagine is that we come back to you with a certain some draft scenarios. I like this characterization that somebody else used. You'll throw tomatoes at it. We'll kind of see what fixes we can make, and then come back to you with hopefully, several scenarios that make sense to you and you decide to adopt. Early in 2022, the Board of Governors will then approve that map and the change in the election system, and this will be incorporated into the 2022 election cycle. So for the November election, these trustee areas would be put in place. When we look at the various considerations that go into drawing maps, I like to categorize these 2 ways. There's the first group, which are things that we must do, and we have to in accordance with the law. And then there's others that we should do because it makes sense from keeping communities together and for providing for good representation. That's a theme that we really try to reinforce throughout this process. So first, when we look at the total population of the district and we balance populations amongst the trustee areas based on that, this is in line with the one person, one vote doctrine or the equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment. This is making sure that everyone's voice is relatively equal. Now, we can't get that perfectly, and so we have a threshold that we use. This is generally accepted through legal precedent and for other jurisdictions, public agencies that go through this, where we can have a variance of no more than 10%. So I can talk a little bit more about that later. Also, we have to make sure that these areas are drawn in compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act. And that means, again, that we're not impairing the ability of a protected class to be able to elect the candidate of their choice. So we don't want to draw boundaries in a way that may split up a community, and then the effect of that is diminishing the ability of that group to be able to have a unified voice and elect who they want. So we keep an eye on that, and all of our maps come with demographic breakdowns and information to be able to judge whether or not that's potentially happening. Now, this second category of must-dos starts with compact and contiguous. Now, that's challenging when you have district boundaries that are not perfectly symmetrical, and there's varying levels of population density and all of that. But to the extent that we look at a map and if we see bizarrely or oddly shaped trustee areas that are drawn, that might raise some flags. And so we try to avoid that to the extent that we can. But of course, that has to be balanced with other things too. Looking at communities of interest, and in California law, that's defined as groups that have shared social and economic characteristics. Trying to keep those intact as possible, again, to provide for good representation for those communities. And I'll note that sometimes this can be in the eye of the beholder, and us as map demographers that are drawing maps, we're not going to know these communities like you do. And so we really look for input on what we should be keeping an eye out for. And that's really helpful for us in our process. Moving on to the next one, natural and geographic or man-made and natural geographic boundaries oftentimes will be the dividing line for those communities of interest. So that often makes sense. Something that I'll note here and also falls under this other local considerations are, other communities within the district, whether those are cities or, census designated places, things like that. I think those often will be represented. Last, I'll just touch on the idea of incumbency. While certainly this can be a consideration and we do take that into account, it shouldn't be the predominant consideration. But there is case law that supports that. And in terms of being able to balance all those other things, it makes sense in terms of the will of the voters who put you into office, that we respect that when we can. We've provided a few different maps here, which I'll share with you. This first map and the second map are the same, just taking a different perspective and zooming in. This shows all of the cities and towns within the district's boundaries, and we've color coded those accordingly. We've also included a table here that has the 2020 census data. Now, it's important to note that this 2020 census data comes directly from the census. And what we do know is that currently that data is going through a validation process with the California Department of Finance, where they're going to make certain adjustments to it. And they will release that finalized data set next week. We're looking at September 20th to have that. So these numbers may change slightly. And so just wanted to point that out. But this census data is important for that first consideration that I shared. When we're looking at balancing areas, we're balancing it based on total population. So that means on total people. It doesn't mean based on total voters. It doesn't mean based on anything else. It's total population. So again, one person, one vote. That is the idea here. What you'll see is that the total population based on that preliminary data is 260,000. So that's a good starting point for us as we start to look at our maps. Again, for this next set of maps, we have the larger whole district view and then zoomed in a bit here. Maybe this one's more appropriate. This is what we call a graduated color map. And this graduated color map takes every census block within the district. And what we've done is we've looked at the citizen voting age population within each one of those census blocks. So this is a proxy for who is eligible to be able to vote in an election. And what we've done is based on the concentration, in this case of Latino voters, we have the darker colors represent higher concentrations of Latino voters, whereas the lighter colors represent less concentration. The citizen voting age population is a valuable data set for us, as I mentioned before, to ensure we're not dividing protected classes. And when we look at our maps and then we look at all of the accompanying data that's broken out by trustee area, it's helpful for us to see, are there some maps that do a better job of keeping those communities together, or are there other maps, or perhaps it doesn't, and that's valuable for us. So when we have a public hearing like this, I think it begs the question of, how should the lines be drawn and what is some of the information that's helpful for us in that process? After all, we're having 2 public hearings before we even draw a map. So really the intent is to make sure that we have a good understanding of things that will be relevant for you all. And as I mentioned before, you're a better judge of that than us. We can handle the, balancing populations and looking at certain things that we know, but we really rely on you to be able to fill in the picture for us. So when we look at the district as a whole and we zoom in, certainly there's things that may pop out, and it could be the 580 and 101, those sorts of things. But maybe there's other things we should take into account as well. And so we have a series of prompts that we think might be helpful to guide that. Examples of feedback that are helpful for us are trying to keep different communities together because there is a natural relationship, or there's that shared connection that I mentioned earlier. That's helpful for us to know as, from being on the outside. Additionally, we could point to specific boundaries like 101 or 37 or Sir Francis Drake. These are just examples, but to try and get the gears turning and to sort of how to frame this, And again, this is a theme that we'll share throughout. We're looking for those scenarios. We're looking for those boundaries that keep communities together and that provide for good representation. So that's a short presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have and go back to any of those slides.
I'll defer quickly to Mia. Just, do you want me to start the public hearing now? Because or do we want to go to trustee questions first?
I think trustee questions I might advise first in case any of the members of the public have the same questions, might help them to hear.
Okay. Any trustees have any questions? Well, God, it's very informative, Justin. I have one. Do we do it according to total population or voting population? You're
Sorry.
muted, Justin.
And I make that mistake every day. That's a great question, and most commonly, it's a good reminder that I need to emphasize there's two different data sets that we're working with that are really trying to accomplish two different things. The census provides us with total population. We have to balance based on total population. But when we're looking at compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act, we look at citizen voting age population, because after all, that's the practical implication of it, where these are the folks that are likely to vote in an election or eligible to vote in an election. So we want to see how it practically affects them. So yes, we balance based on total population, and then we also have citizen voting age population as another metric to see how we're affecting those protected classes and to ensure we're not dividing those communities.
Great, thank you. I see Trustee O'Brien has her hand up. Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you so much, Justin. Just to clarify, you've mentioned the Federal Voting Rights Act. I was under the impression this was being driven by the California Voting Rights Act. Is that the same, more, less? What do we have to follow?
Yeah, and I am a lowly demographer. I will defer to legal counsels who can explain this more articulately, but there is our umbrella of complying with federal law. And then there are more specifics. And in this case, there is certain more stringent requirements that come from the California Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you so much for clarifying.
Yeah.
Nothing lowly about being a demographer. Mia.
Alicia, would you like to add anything to that? Alicia Steinmains is our legal
Right.
counsel who's assisting on this. No, okay.
Good afternoon,
Welcome.
everyone. Thank you. No, I don't have anything to add. I would say that the process is driven by the California Voting Rights Act. And when Justin mentioned, when he was talking, I think it was on the second slide, about the 3 different types of election systems, and the by-trustee-area election system being the safest from challenge, he was referring to the California Voting Rights Act. The standards are a little bit different under the federal law, but really what the board should be concerned with in this process is California Voting Rights Act. And as Justin draws draft maps, he will also consider standards under the federal law.
Thank you. Trustee O'Brien, is your hand down?
No, it is back up, but it just,
Okay.
Alicia's comment just prompted a second question for me, because I had made a note. I don't recall us talking about the option of the from area, which was that middle option. Is that something we discussed, Mia, that we evaluated, or was that just a recommendation we skipped from being at large to by district?
That I would have to review prior notes to
Thank you.
report back on that.
Thank you.
I may add in that we included that in the slide because sometimes it begs the question amongst our clients that says, well, what if we just did the from trustee area? And so just trying to draw a distinction there, not to confuse the point.
But I think your point also that the preferable option is that it's more feasible for others to run. Trustee Long, I don't know if you had your hand up, and since you're on audio,
diversity, can we look at it together now so we understand where the populations are so that we don't get into, I guess the word, desegregation is a way to look at it, meaning that we want to balance diversity across the spectrum. But I think it's important to look at the percentages of each of the areas that are in the total district. The other question I have is, I got a couple of calls about the water, and the water district sort of mimics parts of our voting population as well. What was a surprise water district was that there's a big chunk of population that's in San Rafael for the water district, and it stretches across and then into so where there are city and town jurisdictions, we probably need to be very sensitive to not chopping up town elements.
Wandine, for purposes, now we can't hear. For purposes of the recording, can you paraphrase her questions? And I'm not sure, Justin, I know I could.
Sorry, I unmuted because there was noise in the background. Sorry. And Eva, you finished with the San Rafael, so apologies. My question first and foremost, though, is this is a public hearing, correct? And we're trying to get input from the public first. And then once we receive some of the information after September 20th, we will be able to begin moving around the maps, and we will have the demographic information that we will then be able to greater answer your question, Eva. But in that constant.
It's not just the water district, it's the hospital district.
Correct.
The school district, that we consider all of those elements as we begin to look at the data and
You're gonna have to do that later.
the integration of it to keep the communities that work together well and so forth. Does that make sense?
Wandine, we really can't hear her.
Yeah, so Wandine, again, for recording purposes, this is being recorded. Can you paraphrase her question so that we can at least get it on the record as to what the question is?
She was referencing the, and Eva, I think you're going to have to talk into your phone because your distance from your phone is making your communication not come across. The question, though, that she asked was in relation to specific groups, whether it's Asian or Hispanic, and how we would be able to see in the maps where they're concentrated. And I think the issue of contiguity is part of the answer. So Justin, do you have enough information to, what she was asking is how do we make sure we keep groups together?
Sure.
And also with mindset to the hospital board, district board, and the MMWD board.
And school district boundaries and so forth.
Correct.
Yeah.
To the first question regarding having that data and information, we have that for every census block. And so we certainly can look into that. And whether it's looking at additional maps like the one that we showed in order to demonstrate the concentration of those protected classes, or if it's simply looking at the demographic composition. When we have a map, we're going to provide a table that shows the breakdown of all of those within each trustee area and all the protected classes. And we will be able to see that when we draw the lines in a particular way, it may increase or decrease the concentration of those groups. And so you will always have that information, and we can always dive a little bit deeper if that's helpful. To the second point, just in terms of other jurisdictions that may be going through this similar process and have similar boundaries, I think certainly it makes sense, to the extent that they're looking at similar communities of interest, that we take a similar look at this, and perhaps throughout their process, they may share some of that with us. I will only caution that if their boundaries are different at all, then that changes the population balance equation. And we have, the trick of being able to do that specific to the population of the community college district, as opposed to the others.
One thing I would add about the census groups is Justin and Cooperative Strategies is going to do the best that they can to keep communities of, if there are, communities of color together, but if you have 15%, a 15% Latino population and a 1/10 of that population is spread throughout the district, that's really just not going to be possible. And so that's what Justin's job is going to do, is to figure out if that's even possible. But we just won't know until we validate the census data to determine, where everyone is spread out, or if they are all concentrated, or if a certain group is concentrated in a particular region of the district.
Yeah, and I think in our prior investigations of this issue, when there were prior communications about it, we did conclude that it wasn't possible because of the chunks that are broken up throughout. But we're going to do our best. Any other trustee have any question? Otherwise, then I don't see any hands. Let's move on to the public hearing, and I'll open the public hearing now. And does anyone want to raise their hand if you have questions or comments?
I just recommend the board act to open the public hearing officially.
Oh, so take a motion to open the public hearing. Thank you very much, Council. So may I have a motion to open the public hearing?
Second.
So we had a motion by O'Brien, a second by Cranenberg. Roll call, please.
Trustee Crowe. Trustee De Silva. You're
Trustee De
muted.
Silva?
Trustee
Did you
De
vote?
Silva, you're muted.
Aye.
Yeah, but he
Thank
waived.
you.
Okay. Trustee Cranenberg.
Aye.
Trustee Long.
Aye.
Trustee O'Brien.
Aye.
Trustee Yoshihara.
Aye.
Trustee Conti, aye. Trustee Prainer.
All right, thank you very much. Now we open the hearing. If people could raise their hand or indicate somehow, if I can call on you. I see former trustee Stuart Tannenberg, please. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Wandine. As a member of the county board on the school district organization, Stephanie and I serve on that board, and having gone through this process with both Novato Unified and San Rafael School District, we found that there was a lot of data where we're creating districts, 7 districts of approximately 36,000 plus or minus population. Those identified underserved groups tend to be concentrated in specific areas like Sausalito and Central Marin and parts of Novato. But then when you break down the population, you find out that many of those constituencies are not voters. They're not registered to vote. So we kind of will be losing some of the effectiveness that we're trying to create by having those populations being really unable to vote for a representative that we're trying to help those identified populations, to serve.
Right.
So it's a difficult process. And I remember that Justin had done a couple presentations for us on the SDO committee, and the data that was presented after the fact really kind of emphasized the fact that Marin County, because we're so small and we have these like small pockets of identified populations, it's a difficult process. But ultimately we have to proceed, and there's probably going to be some bumps in the road. So that's my comments.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? And does the league have anything?
You're muted.
I'm trying to,
There we go.
good. Well, I
Welcome.
actually, and thank you, and thank you, everyone for having this hearing. One thing that I have been thinking about when we're talking about looking at as citizens of voting age is that these boundaries are going to be in place for 10 years. So sure, it's important to consider right now who can vote, who is a voter, but that's going to change too, right? People will become of voting age. People may register to vote who aren't registered. I know we have a big effort to get into communities where people are less likely to be registered and get them registered and to really get out the vote. So it's not like we have a static situation, and this is 10 years. that this is going to be in place. Those are just the thoughts that I had. And I have one tiny suggestion for your website, if you don't mind. I think it would really be helpful if you have the link to the public hearings up front and really obvious, rather than having to scroll down to find it.
All right, thank you.
Noted, thanks.
And I know that the league had a great redistricting program the other day and gave us kudos for our process and our website. So thanks to Mia and to Alicia and everyone involved in that as well. I don't see any other hands, but does anyone want to unmute and say if you have a question? And
I actually have one more comment, if I
Please.
could. I know in looking at the population, you're doing a countywide, obviously, subdivisions, but you've got 2 campuses to think about. And I'm wondering how that's going to play into this. If the communities around the 2 campuses are going to have different ideas about how they need to be grouped together.
good point. And I think that's part of why we're having the public hearing, so that as we develop the maps, we'll be able to perhaps draw more interest and attention when it becomes more specific. Seriously, no other, oh, I see, Vice President Nelson, please.
So just one thing I wanted to quickly mention as we show maps and so forth. Some people may not realize this, but the Marin Community College District does not represent the Marin County proper. The northern part of the county actually, portions of the northern part of the county actually belong to Santa Rosa Junior College District, not Marin Community College District. So I just want to make sure the maps are representative of the actual district and not the actual county.
And we also have a couple of precincts in Sonoma next to the Shoreline School District that are part of our district.
Yeah, don't we have something in Petaluma somewhere?
Yeah, it's off to the, yeah, it's definitely Sonoma County. Okay, I don't see any other comments and we're right on time now. So Justin, thank you very much. Alicia, Mia, it's been great. Any other comments? Then we will take a motion to close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by O'Brien,
Second,
second by Conti. Roll call, please.
Trustee Crow,
Aye.
Trustee De Silva,
Aye.
Trustee Cranenberg,
Aye.
Trustee Long,
Aye.
Trustee O'Brien,
Aye.
Trustee Yoshihara.
Aye.
Trustee Conti, aye. Trustee Trainer.
Aye, thank you.